Getting into a new war game can feel a bit like buying a car. Fancy, expensive, and a little confusing at times, but what if there was a game that just worked as it came out of the box? Well, mostly. Today, we're going to be checking out Battle for Singapore, the 2-player starter set for Armoured Clash, and how to make the one thing in this box that's missing. Let's armour those APCs and clash those cavalry. For the roll. For those of you that don't know, Armoured Clash is an epic-scale alternate history wargame set in a diesel punk version of the late 19th century. Think tanks, walkers and weird science, all alongside real-world inspired units. The global powers are locked in brutal regional conflicts, and the Battle for Singapore focuses on one of the key flashpoints in the Pacific Theatre, the Crown against a fierce Empire assault, with prototype vehicles and advanced tech in the mix. I've played a couple of games so far and I think it's a really good system, and it's not just me saying that it's good. Armoured Clash took home the judges' choice for Best Miniature Range and Best Miniature Rules in the UK Games Expo this year. That's a huge deal in the wargaming world, especially if you're a relatively new system competing against some seriously big names. Before I jump into what's in the box, I want to let you know that War Cradle Studios, the owners of Armoured Clash, sent me this box for free. However, I'm under no contract and the opinions I'm expressing are purely my own. So, what's in the box? 2 skirmish-sized forces, the Crown and the Empire, injection-molded plastic miniatures and resin commander units, 2 quick start rulebooks, 2 dice and token sets, and 2 movement tools. Having a starter box that has 2 of everything in it is a real breath of fresh air. No need to share any rulebooks, dice or trackers. Each player has their own. For a skirmish-sized game, this is practically plug and play. Everything's in the box. Well, except terrain, but more on that in a minute. And for larger scale games, with the exception of more models, the only additional purchase that you'll need to make are these Command & Conquest decks. Gameplay is fast, tactical and intuitive. You'll be thinking about flanking, armor ranks and unit synergy, not memorizing 1500 keywords. The one thing that's missing though? Terrain. Well, kind of. You see, there are a few terrain sprues inside the box. It's enough to build sort of 3, maybe 4 buildings. Now, a small amount of terrain in a starter box is fairly standard, but it's not enough to fill a board. So in this video, I wanted to go through how I turned the few sprues of terrain into a full board's worth. For a skirmish-sized game, the board size uses a 36 by 48 inch and is recommended to have between 5 and 15 terrain pieces. I wanted some variety in the terrain features I was going to make, so I chose 3 different features that I thought would be complemented on the board: rock faces, buildings, and forestry. Starting with the rock faces, the best option I thought would be to cast these in plaster. I had a mould that I picked up years ago from Woodland Scenics when I first started making terrain. I used cheap plaster of Paris that you can pick up online or from your local craft or hobby store to cast multiple rock faces. I wasn't sure how many I'd use, but I wanted to make sure that I had enough regardless of what I would build. The next part was to create a base for the rock cast to sit against. I used a couple of 1-inch thick foam offcuts that I had from a previous project stacked on top of one another. Light and thick enough to give the piece some bulk whilst keeping the weight down. To shape the blocks, I started off by making some temporary connections using some toothpicks, allowing me to shape the piece as a hole on a hot wire cutter. I don't have a handheld cutter, so the Proxon was up. You can also use a sharp knife to cut out foam, but the hot wire makes quick work of removing bulk material to get a basic shape. For this piece, I knew that I wanted to integrate one of the buildings from the box, so I carved out a section to match the height and width. The next thing to do was to put together the first building. Just like the miniature kits that we're used to, these slot together really well and have some incredible detail across the board. Another great thing about the terrain sets is that they're completely modular, meaning that you can build so many different combinations to then fit the style of your board. Cradle Studios, the makers of Armoured Clash, also do a dedicated terrain box called the Dystopian Industrial Set, which they were kind enough to send me a couple of boxes of, but we'll get into that in another video. The buildings look great and are highly detailed and are also game agnostic, so they work really well with other epic scale systems such as Warpath or Legions Imperialis. The next thing to do was to glue the sections together using PVA and pin these in place whilst the glue dried overnight with some more toothpicks. Moving on to texturing the base, I mixed up batches of modelling compound, spreading this over the piece and adding the plaster rock casts as I went. The best thing to do when working with modelling compound, on a larger terrain piece especially, is to work in sections, mixing small batches at a time to avoid the mixture drying out before you've got around to using it. I also created a couple more rocky terrain pieces, one that integrated another building and then a freestanding archway that would be a really cool centerpiece, both following the same methods that I used in the first build. After leaving these to fully dry overnight, it was time to get to painting. For rock faces cast in plaster, I've always found the leopard spot method works best. For those that don't know, this is the method where you use diluted paints and then a sponge to build up layers as you go. I'm using 5 colours in total for mine: brown, yellow, green, grey and black. Dilute the inks with water into separate containers and then use a sponge to dab on each paint randomly, building up as you go. After the basic coverage, give the entire rock face a subtle black wash. Each of the colours dries lighter than it goes on, so remember you can always add more but you can't take it away. If you're looking for more of a grey slate or a granite effect, this should work well. But if you want more sort of earthy tones, go over the piece once more with a brown wash this time. You can then finish up by adding small dabs of green to the undersides of any outcrops. Once again, leave these to dry fully, and then just for a little bit more detail, add flocking where you think it'll work. There's no right or wrong answer to any of this, just what you think will work for your table. The next piece of terrain I wanted to showcase for this build is a slight rework of an old classic, but so much better in my humble opinion. Forests and woodlands are staple for almost all wargames and TTRPGs, but making the trees movable to be able to actually get your army within the terrain without compromising the look is a little trickier. I actually covered how to make these in a lot more detail in my previous video, so if you want a full step-by-step guide, go check it out. The link of the video is in the corner now or in the description below. The simple version is to get yourself some Plasticard, or if you've got a 3D filament printer, I made a Treadplate sheet that you can download and print for free. The Plasticard thickness gives the piece flexibility and a really low profile on the tabletop for better flow with small scale games. Using some of the tile grout and iron powder mixture that I discussed in the previous video, mix this with PVA glue until you get a thick consistency and spread this over the Plasticard with a smooth and even layer. I picked up some of these miniature trees for relatively cheap off Amazon and got to cutting off the bottom stems and gluing some magnets on. Once again, leave these to dry and then just paint to match the rest of the tree. Once everything's dry again, just add flocking to detail that a little bit more. And as easy as that, you've got yourself some removable forest terrain that your minis can then interact with. As I said, if you want more of an in-depth guide on making magnetic forest terrain, check out the video in the description below. The last thing to do now is just to paint up the buildings and minis from the starter box. Whilst I do that, I also wanted to take the chance to thank each and every one of you that supported the channel, either through watching these videos, subscribing to the channel, using the affiliate links in the descriptions below, or being part of the very special group of rollers that make up the Patreon, such as the channel producer, Danny H. All of you give me the chance to keep making these videos, and it's a privilege to do so. If you're considering supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon member, you'll get access to a bunch of goodies such as the monthly STL files for the faction-inspired combat gauges and dice dispensers, as well as the monthly prize draws, and access to the private Discord server where you'll find me and the amazing community that we've built, all from as little as $4 per month. The link for which is in the description below. I guess the last thing to do now is to see how it looks on the tabletop. So, pretty much everything you and a friend need to play Armoured Clash is inside this box, with the exception of the larger terrain pieces that I've just shown you how to build. Overall, you get 2 large armies, award-winning rules, gorgeous minis, and a game you can actually play straight out of the box, all for less than most single army boxes. Looking at you, James. If you've been eyeing up something that's fresh and that isn't stuck in endless codex cycles or 500-page rulebooks, Armoured Clash is 100% worth a look. Once again, I want to be clear that the guys over at Warcradle Studios did send me this box for free to review, but the opinions I've expressed are fully my own. And overall, I'm a big fan. I mean, I don't know any starter box that gives you pretty much everything you need to play a game for less than £50 per person. If you're in the UK or Europe and you'd like to pick up your own starter box, the link in the description below is actually an affiliate link which helps out the channel at no extra cost to you. If you're in the US or Canada, I've also detailed the names of the stockists that will carry the game as well. Let me know in the comments below what you think and if it's something that you'd be interested in. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.